let's get into it. So, um, Frederick Douglass was a orator, writer, statesman. He was a very important leader to the movement of the African American civil rights in the 19th centuries. And from what I was reading, um, from I guess after he passed, there was like uh, Frederick, even in his books that he wrote, could not pinpoint like his actual age because, of course, he was a slave, and he never could pinpoint his age in the sense that when he was telling back the stories, it was like I was a slave. What the fuck do I look like? Like knowing my age, all we did was work and get whooped. So, but with the help of like some other, I want to say, writers who were writing about Frederick Douglass, they kind of pinpointed the age he would have been at when he was telling these stories, which was pretty cool. And of course, the coolest part of Frederick Douglass is that he knew Abraham Lincoln, and him and Abraham Lincoln were the pioneers for equal rights for African American men during the Civil War. So he was escaped from slavery in Maryland in 1838. Frederick Douglass. Everybody knows him because his birthday was on February 14th, which I should have done it on the 14th, but I did somebody else. But and that's he's one of the reasons why we have Black History Month in February, although it's the shortest day, but it's still nonetheless Frederick Douglass was a very smart man, coming from being enslaved to becoming an auto and a writer of your life and a leader for civil rights for blacks. That's and for him to have this life where he's writing books and he's getting fame from writing the books, and people are wondering like, how can you go from being a slave to this type of writing? Who knew niggas could do that? He got fame from it, and he helped with majority, like he helped with majority of a lot of like the the not with the you not with the U.S. Constitution or anything, but he was a real integral part to being the voice of black people and trying to get those equal rights. He also supported women's suffrage as well, and he also wrote and made books as well, like night of like life and times of Frederick Douglass. You know what I mean? My bondage and my freedom. So he was a real integral part of like the movement for women's suffrage, the equality of blacks, and all that stuff. So he deserves a spot on this list, whether anybody knows it or not. But majority of people know or should know who Frederick Douglass is. Everybody should. You should have some sense of it. You should understand why we have Black History Month in February, although it's the shortest month, because I hear way too many people. Well, why do we have Black History Month on the shortest month? Well, if you do your research instead of being an ignorant Negro, you would understand why. I'm not here to explain it to you. Um, but the part that I really wanted to get to, which is the part that I really wanted to get to, um, that I was actually reading, is that for Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass to be the figures for the equal to like abolish slavery and equal rights and all this stuff, Abraham Lincoln didn't publicly acknowledge Douglass at all. And I mean, like why would you? Like I'm literally the president. What I look like having a having a ex-slave give me advice on how, how I should do it, how I should, all that stuff. But Abraham Lincoln played an integral part with the Emancipation Proclamation, of course, that took effect July 1st, 1863. Which freed the slaves and everything. But it was it was through the help of Frederick Douglass, though, because he did do a lot, and he also had like sons that participated. Oh, I say participated, that went to war. Was Charlie Douglas? He joined the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, but he was ill for for a majority of his service. And then he had Lewis Douglas, who fought in the Battle of Fort Wagner. It's just crazy when you got, children in the war, and, you want them to. Well, honestly, I don't know how it worked, because black people in the war back then, weren't we just cannon fodder? Like, didn't we just go to the front lines? I mean, not saying that we didn't have guns, but we were literally on the front lines. So we would get shot first, so the white people can reload, shoot, all that stuff. So it was, so it says, after Lincoln had finally allowed black soldiers to serve in the Union Army, Douglas helped the recruitment efforts, publishing his famous broadside Men of Color to Arms on March 21st, 1863. So, with him and Abraham Lincoln, and how they use, that you can be willing to go to the army, rather than it's just like, I want that one, and that one. They're coming to war and they have no say-so. He real, seems like a real smart guy that he was. I'm pretty sure he was a very smart guy. And, yeah, that was Frederick Douglass, escaped slaves. He knew Abraham Lincoln. That's probably to meet the president and to not be his right hand, but you're working alongside Abraham Lincoln to help black people, and to help black people and stuff like that. It's like a white man, the president, and we're working almost side by side. I don't know whether or not during that time where it's like, is this good or bad? Working with a white man to help black people when white men are the ones that enslaved us first. But you could make the argument that it was our fault, for selling our people to the white people. So, but let's go ahead and get into some movies. Well, not movies, videos.
Famed author Frederick Douglass worked tirelessly as an abolitionist and an advocate for equal rights.
You can't talk about the history of civil rights in this country without talking about Frederick Douglass. Long before Dr. King, the civil rights movement, here's a man who was talking about basic dignity for people in this country.
Born into slavery in Talbot County, Maryland, around 1818, Frederick Douglass became educated first through his master's wife and eventually on his own. Douglass escaped slavery in 1838 by fleeing to New York and became a preacher the following year.
Certainly, during Douglass's time, literacy for Africans was absolutely forbidden. In fact, it was very clear that once Africans could read and write, many wrote their own passes, which allowed them to move from place to place, and obviously this was disruptive to a very repressive system.
After his Garrison, the editor of the abolitionist paper, The Liberator, Douglass began touring the United States as a speaker with the American Anti-Slavery Society.
Many whites refused to believe that Frederick Douglass had ever been a slave because he was so obviously intelligent, he was such a powerful speaker.
In 1845, Douglass wrote and published his first autobiography entitled Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Although the book was a U.S. bestseller, Douglass was forced to live in Europe for 2 years to evade recapture. He ultimately purchased his freedom in 1847.
People were shocked about Frederick Douglass, an ex-slave, writing his autobiography, and it was so poignant, and it was such a bird's-eye view of what was going on the plantation. He put it in very plain language, and it was just a powerful testimony of why slavery needed to end in our country.
Douglass became the only African American to attend the first Women's Rights Convention in 1848, and by 1861, Douglass was famous nationwide, advising both President Lincoln and Johnson on the welfare of African Americans.
By any measure, Frederick Douglass was a real American hero. He was a public intellectual, he was a statesman, he was an activist, and his life and his political commitment were dedicated to human rights, not just to civil rights or to the end of slavery.
During his lifetime, Douglass was U.S. Ambassador to the Dominican Republic, and in 1872, he became the first African American to appear on a presidential ballot when he was nominated as vice president. Frederick Douglass died on February 20th, 1895, from natural causes.
Being a fucking legend. That's how he died. Natural causes, my ass. Being a fucking legend.
This is a story of an unlikely friendship that transformed America forever.
Under his wise and beneficent rule, we saw ourselves gradually lifted from the depths of slavery to the heights of liberty and manhood. Though we waited long, we saw all this and more.
Brian is the best content marketing team lead I've ever worked with, but before he created his content calendar using Monday.
Abraham Lincoln is known as the Great Emancipator, but the moniker wasn't earned overnight. It would take the tireless work of the abolitionist movement, led by Frederick Douglass, who himself was born enslaved, to guide Lincoln towards the cause of freedom.
I am alike familiar with the whip and chain of slavery, and the lash and sting of public neglect and scorn, that my back is marked with the one, and my soul is fettered with the other.
After years of opposition, these two giants would find common ground and change the course of history. 10 years before the Emancipation Proclamation was enacted,
if all earthly power were given me, I should not know what to do as to the existing institution.
Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder.
Frederick Douglass, he never had a pair of pants or shoes until he was about 6 or 7 years old. He would sleep head first in an old corn sack with his feet hanging out on cold winter nights to try and keep himself warm.
Teaching the enslaved to read was illegal, so young Frederick secretly traded what little food he had in exchange for reading lessons.
It just shows how much he understood how education was going to be his key to freedom.
And a key to freedom it was. At the age of 20, Douglass made a daring escape and went north, settling in Massachusetts. There he soared. From orator,
The one cannot be truly free, while the other is a slave.
to newspaper editor,
Truth is of no color.
and best-selling author.
From that moment, I understood the pathway from slavery to freedom.
He was the central voice of the abolitionist movement.
He had this natural gift for communication. He was eloquent. He was charismatic.
There wasn't a venue, a building large enough to hold people who wanted to hear him.
Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed.
Much of Douglas's irony was directed towards Washington, D.C. and Abraham Lincoln, the anti-slavery president who took office just as the Civil War began in 1861.
Anti-slavery is very different than being an abolitionist. It was very gradual that most anti-slavery candidates believed in the abolition of slavery.
I do not suppose that ultimate extinction would occur in less than 100 years at the least.
That would have put the end of slavery in 1958. And for Frederick Douglass, that's outrageous.
Mr. Lincoln is quite a genuine representative of American prejudice, and far more concerned for the preservation of slavery.
Douglas was relentless in his fight for freedom, and with the steady drumbeat of the abolitionist movement in his ear, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing enslaved people in the southern states, and for the first time, making it legal for all black men to fight in the Civil War. These new soldiers injected the Union Army with much-needed manpower, but still, they faced discrimination and disparity.
Douglas is so outraged that he makes a trip to D.C. and decides he wants to meet with Lincoln himself.
To his surprise, Lincoln agreed to see him immediately.
He was ushered up past all of the people that were waiting to see Lincoln that day. And just imagine this visual of this black man just bounding up the steps, and people are looking at him like, who is that?
Lincoln begins the conversation, and he says, "Hello, Mr. Douglas," essentially. It's good finally to meet you. I've read your writings a lot. I know you've been very critical of me.
Their one-on-one left a lasting impression on both men, and Lincoln vowed to improve the conditions for black soldiers.
Want to break into cybersecurity but don't have experience? The Google Cybersecurity Certificate uses real-world scenarios to teach you technical skills. You'll be able to step foot in your first job and feel comfortable and confident in this.
My whole interview with the president was gratifying and did much to assure me that slavery would not survive the war, and that the country would survive both slavery and war.
A year later, it is Lincoln who needs Douglas's help.
He feels he's going to lose re-election, essentially says, I need you. I think the war is going badly.
Lincoln entrusted Douglas with creating a plan for aiding the escape of enslaved people from rebel territory so that they could join the Union cause.
Douglas writes a detailed letter to Lincoln spelling out his vision of these special forces.
He did not let me feel for a moment that there was any difference in the color of our skins. The president is a most remarkable man.
With Douglas's support, Lincoln would go on to turn the tide of the war and win re-election. The following year, Douglas returned to Washington once more to attend the inauguration.
Now in this multitude of elite of the land, I felt myself a man among men.
It's the first time a president devotes most of the speech to African Americans.
1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves.
Frederick Douglass heard his words and his language in Lincoln's address.
Until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another, drawn with the sword.
The work that he had done over so many years, he was now hearing this at a very important moment in time in the nation's history.
Douglas is invited to the White House, for a reception, sees Douglas enter, and he yells out,
Here comes my friend, Frederick Douglass. There is no man in the country whose opinion I value more than yours.
Mr. Lincoln, that was a sacred effort.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom.
Frederick Douglass spoke truth to power, and he never stopped fighting for his people, and he understood that the struggle continued. He said, without struggle,
there is no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will.
Yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, we don't need to know about him being the presidential advisor because that video just said like everything so perfectly. But the one thing I didn't know was that like half of Lincoln's speech was about Frederick Douglass. Be like, how do you know that nigga? Almost the whole speech is gonna be about him. Yeah, he helped me out a lot. Fuck y'all been doing. So, yeah. Frederick Douglass, man, he was really that guy, very smart and intelligent in a time where they didn't believe black people could. So that's going to be the end of it for today.